Salutations, friends on the internet. I'm going to be working on a page in a few minutes, but while I'm still on break, I just wanted to take a moment and talk about something. I wanted to talk about films and television. I uh, I actually draw while uh, watching or while film is on. I'll often have a sketchbook, or maybe I'm working on a painting, or maybe I'm just just doing some thumbnail sketches or something like that. So often I experience film and television as an audio drama. If it gets interesting, I might glance up and watch it. And very rarely I will sit down and actually watch a film. Anyway, I was going to mention what films I experienced, for lack of a better term, last week. And I just opened this sketchbook to this page because I was working on the sketchbook last week, if I remember right. I'll talk about the sketchbook later. This is just one of the more recent pages. So anyway, so last week I saw or listened to Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, which is a B grade film from the 1950s. It is a kind of a monster film in a way. It's a drive-in movie type film. I've always enjoyed Mystery Science Theater 3000, but a lot of times I like the films without the robots and the riffing. I genuinely like um, many of their films, like I don't know, Attack of the Giant Gila Monster and the Gamera films. Those are all a lot of fun. Without the jokes, and the same thing with this. This is the type of film that they would have done, especially in the old days with Joel. A film like this isn't necessarily high art, but nor is it meant to be. It's not necessarily meant to be a convincing otherworld like King Kong, or the kind of the tapestries of Ray Harryhausen, where he's just kind of weaving this dream image, and with Harryhausen, the monsters and the music work together for this marvelous effect. No, this is what it is. It's a fun drive-in film. It doesn't make any sense, nor is it really supposed to. And I only watched the last 5 minutes. I was drawing the whole time, but when the woman grows and goes on a King Kong rampage, that was the part to watch. It's kind of deliriously goofy in a way. I mean, I suppose one could draw some complicated themes about the dissipation of a marriage. I mean, that's the actual plot of the film, is a family squabble, husband and wife. But I think it's just meant to be an exercise in imagination. And really, these B films, they're not really made anymore like this. I mean, we still have B films, like asylum films like that. But these films in the 50s and 60s are kind of whimsical in a way. They're not meant to be taken literally, but they're not meant to be spoofs like the asylum films are. These films are, as I mentioned before, really just exercises in imagination, but they're also commercial product for the way films were distributed back then. Now, the only film I actually watched out of this list is Thor Ragnarok. It came out last year. I don't see a lot of new films, and I don't see a lot of recently made films. This is a good Marvel movie. I'm not going to really go into the story. There are dozens of people who actually review film, and that's not really my area of interest. Just suffice it to say, this film was extremely entertaining. I liked the 1980s aesthetics, at least at certain parts of the film. They had the neon lights and some of the music which evoked that time period. it really makes me wish that Marvel had not gone bankrupt in the 1990s and that these films had been made in that time period. Even with the limitations of technology, there is a chance that those films might have been they would have been special in a way that they can't quite beat today. I mean, they would have been more practical. There would have been pros and cons. I'm not going to go into that. The one thing I am going to mention is that this film is really two stories, which I wish had been separated. The Planet Hulk story and the Gotterdammerung story. And as entertaining as the Hulk story was, I wish that were a film all by itself. That's a buddy comedy movie with Loki and Thor, and that has its own energy to it. And the world building of that film and the dialogue patterns were working for a specific type of story, and I don't think that quite matched the framing device of the fall of the gods. So I wish that that had been a separate movie. I wish we had just a movie with the gang seeing Hulk, and we could have hints of Hela's coming, and then the next film would have been a more serious thing. I bring out this graphic novel because this is based on Wagner's Ring Cycle, which this is from more than a century ago. I'm not going to go into to Wagner. Suffice it to say that the Ring Cycle was the Lord of the Rings films of its day. It was the Star Wars phenomenon of its day, and it in some ways it's the ur text of the grand fantasy epic that's united over several stories and sort of with the broad themes put together. I'm not aware of any films that actually treat the Ring Cycle seriously, aside from obviously the opera itself, filming the opera or something like that. I think it would have been nice if the Marvel films had built up to something like this. Obviously, Marvel's version of Teutonic mythology is very different. It's kind of a magical alien world. Their version of Asgard has maybe 600 people, and it's a disc world, and the city is maybe 5 miles in diameter, and it's got some mountains in the distance. It's a different feel. It's accomplishing something else. But if you're interested in a graphic novel version of the Ring Cycle, this is a place to look. Finally, last night I listened to some classic episodes of The Twilight Zone. Each episode of The Twilight Zone is worthy of a hour discussion, and I'm just going to just mention these episodes very quickly. The Odyssey of Flight 33 it's a yarn. It's just a little romp. I think people mostly remember it for the little scene with the dinosaur head and the World's Fair. Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, we have Captain Kirk looking at a gremlin. It's a Cassandra story. And it's also a little bit of a story about a marriage. It's not really a story about an airplane. It's not, don't never take the Twilight Zone literally. These are parables. The Monsters That Do on Maple Street has been discussed by more literary folk than I. I sometimes feel that once again we don't take this literally. You don't turn off the power at 6 o'clock and have a riot by 8 o'clock. But for me, the Maple Street is a metaphor of a person's mind, and the different neighbors were all elements of that person's mind, like Inside Out in a way. The different neighbors represented different things, and this was a single mind collapsing on itself. Although it is also funny to think about the aliens planting this oddly specific story for the nerd to read and bring up, and the aliens have these oddly specific powers of being able to turn on and off attic lights and cars and things like that. Um, the My favorite is Time Enough at Last, and people sometimes think of this as a story about the H bomb or a story about reading, but I take Serling at his word. At the beginning of the tale, he says that Henry Beamish, I believe, maybe Bemis, Henry Beamish, we'll call him Henry, that he is of the fraternity of dreamers, and this story is a metaphor for being a dreamer in a world that doesn't value dreaming, and that no matter how he tries, circumstances conspire against him. It's not really a story about Henry Beamish and his boss and his wife. They are just elements of that story. Um, and then the reading is an escape to a better life. This is actually really an interesting play, the way it's set up. You'll notice that in the desolation, that there's no sun. There's he doesn't even try to build a roof. There are no cloud. Well, it's kind of hazy. There's no moon. It's not meant to be a realistic portrayal. This is the desolation of the soul we're talking about. It is dark in that sense. I mean, he contemplates suicide, which may or may not be literal, of course, but it's these are all good short stories. They're good visual short stories. They're good. It's just good to listen to the Twilight Zone because it is like a radio drama, and these stories are set up very well. You know, when we're introduced to Henry, his boss casually mentions how Henry will read in the bank vault, and that comes back later. Um, the same thing with the monsters. You know, we're that one neighbor walks away, and we're told about the story the boy reads. It all comes back. These are tightly written narratives, and I think that's all for now. I need to work on a page, and I suppose I will talk to you people later. Farewell.